Hello there, and welcome. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight, wherever you are, whether it's evening, late afternoon, or deep into the small hours. This is a space just for you, a quiet corner where time can stretch and the world can soften. In tonight's story, we'll drift slowly into the distant past, not to study or to learn in haste, but simply to wander. Together, we'll explore an old world gently, through textures, sounds, and slow, steady breath. The history we'll visit isn't loud or urgent. It doesn't demand your attention. It just waits. And if we listen, it speaks in the softest ways. If you find comfort here, I'd be honored if you'd like or subscribe, but only if it feels right for you. And if you feel like sharing, leave a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I find it quietly lovely to imagine all of us scattered across the globe, connected by curiosity and calm. Now would be a good time to make a warm drink. Maybe light a candle. Let your shoulders drop. Let the rhythm of your day begin to slow. You don't need to do anything. Just listen and let the world grow a little softer. So now, when you're ready, let's begin. Damp wool and birch smoke. A drowsy day inside a Neolithic longhouse. You wake slowly beneath the weight of wool and woven reed. The air inside the longhouse is cold, but not cruel. It has the stillness of a held breath, the hush of a world just beginning again. Somewhere in the dark rafters above, smoke has soaked into the thatch like memory. You don't rush to sit up. You lie still, eyes open to the faint amber blur of early light slipping through the smoke hole above the hearth, where yesterday's fire now whispers in dull, orange embers. You share this house with others, 3 families, 2 dogs, and the small ghosts of past seasons. Every rafter bears soot from winters long buried. Every post has been stroked by hands now gone. The longhouse holds memory, even when its people do not speak. A thick pelt, part sheep and part time, clings to your shoulders as you rise. Your limbs are stiff, but not sore. The straw beneath your sleeping mat crackles softly as you shift. It's early still. The rest of the longhouse murmurs, but does not stir. You wrap your fingers around the worn leather strap of your outer tunic and pull it over your head, the fabric cold against your arms. A faint scent of wood smoke, wool grease, and dried nettle leaves follows you, your scent and the scent of everyone. You stand near the fire pit, coaxing warmth from it without yet feeding it. You don't want to wake the baby. You crouch, blow softly. Birch sparks glow. A curl of smoke rises to meet your breath. Outside, beyond the woven wall and earth-smooth doorway, the world is silver with dew. Mist hugs the dark ridgeline to the east. You know this mist. It follows the river, curling through barley rows and across the damp shoulders of sleeping goats. You step over the threshold quietly, careful of the creaking hinge, and enter the cool morning barefoot. The ground is soft, the earth still holding last night's chill. Crushed yarrow and wood sorrel spring beneath your feet, releasing their bitter perfume. The chickens rustle under their overturned basket, and one of the dogs lifts its head sleepily, then settles back down. You do not speak. The land doesn't require language this early. You walk the short distance to the stream with a clay pot held close. The stream is always awake. Its voice is a constant murmur through alder roots and river stones, clear and old. You dip the pot with practiced care and let your fingers trail through the water. It's shockingly cold, ice-fed from higher up a slope, but it wakes something in your chest, something clean and steady. You turn back. As you near the longhouse again, you see another figure rising through the mist. Nayla, your cousin by way of your mother's sister. She lives in the far end of the longhouse, near the goat stall, and she is always up early. Her hair is tied back in a soft leather loop, her cloak patched at the elbows with bark fiber thread. She's carrying kindling, balanced easily across her forearms. You nod at one another, wordless, companions of the same rhythm. Inside, the house has begun to breathe again. Low sounds, someone shifting beneath a hide, the thud of an elbow on wood, a half-hummed tune from a child who does not yet remember it is morning. You return to the hearth and pour the stream water into the carved pot suspended over the coals. The sound of water touching heat is satisfying. Hiss and sigh. You add dry barley, a pinch of salt, a piece of dried apple from last autumn's slow windfall. Later, maybe a splash of goat milk. The house smells sharper now. Smoke, wood, boiling grain, wool. A quiet feast of senses. Someone stirs behind you. It is Nayla. She kneels and adds a few sticks to the edge of the fire, careful not to break its silence. "You fetched water already?" she asks softly. You nod. Her voice is light, still full of sleep. She places a small bundle beside the hearth, twisted nettle stems for dyeing, and 2 smooth eggs wrapped in moss. She glances toward the far end of the longhouse, where her son is still curled like a fox cub under a patched wool pelt. He didn't sleep well, dreamed of the river again. The dark one or the clear one? You ask. The one with hands. Her voice holds no fear, only gentle weariness. He says they pull at his toes. You share a soft breath of knowing. Dreams like that come in the cold weeks, when the air is heavy with ash and the stories of old winters grow bold again. You reach for a bit of crushed mugwort and drop it into the pot, an old trick to help the mind stay where it belongs. The two of you sit in silence, knees drawn close, watching the steam curl upward. Behind you, children stir. Dogs stretch. The longhouse begins to speak in full. Murmurs, yawns, the sound of grinding stone against grain. One of the older women begins to hum as she sharpens a flint scraper with deliberate rhythm. A boy coughs and is quickly wrapped in a shawl by his mother. Life returns not all at once, but in folds. The bread from yesterday's bake is passed down from a hanging net, a solid oat and lentil loaf wrapped in cloth. You tear off a chunk and hand half to Nayla. She eats slowly, eyes half closed. This is not a rushed morning. There is little sense in speed. The sun will rise only when it chooses, and the barley will not grow faster for your labor. Mid-morning brings a soft silver light through the doorway. You step outside again, this time with a wide netting basket to check the herbs hanging beneath the eaves. Last week's nettle is nearly dry, stiff and rich smelling. You test a strand between your fingers. It crumbles slightly. Good. You'll grind it later, add it to dough or dye. Beneath the basket, a small patch of creeping thyme has sprouted where someone spilled broth weeks ago. You crouch, run your fingers over it. It smells like warm grass and stone. You hear footsteps behind you. It's Nayla again, holding her son on her hip. He is awake now, alert-eyed and quiet. She balances a small bowl of soaked lentils in one hand. "I'm taking him to the clearing," she says. "He wants to watch the goats." You nod. "I'll bring the spindles. We can sit a while." You follow them a short while later, carrying a leather bundle of raw wool and a few stone spindles wrapped in cloth. The path to the goat pen is slick with dew and half lost in fog. The goats are restless today, chewing bark and huffing steam. You and Nayla settle on a low rock and begin to spin the wool, slowly drawing it out with practiced fingers. Time passes gently here. Her son hums to himself and builds tiny fences from twigs. The goats bleat. A crow calls overhead. The thread grows longer in your hands. You remember the journey. Last moon's walk to the river crossing, where you traded smoked eel for flint cores. The sky had been heavy with geese then, and the smell of marsh was thick in your clothes for days. You had walked alone for much of it, carrying a small pot of dried mushrooms as a gift for a cousin you hadn't seen in 3 winters. She had aged. You had not expected that. Now the wool slips through your fingers, smooth as the stream's voice. Nayla speaks quietly of last year's planting, of the barley's strange lean, of the bees that no longer come near the rye. You do not speak much. You're not thinking of bees, not really. You were thinking of how the fog curls around the fence posts like smoke made solid, and of how her son watches the goats with the intense stillness of a boy not yet trained to hurry. As the sun rises, the fog lifts and the longhouse glows like amber in the soft light. It looks old and eternal. You know it has been rebuilt twice in your lifetime, but some of its timbers, just a few, were here before you were born, before Nayla was born, maybe even before the old woman with the carved comb was born. You don't name the feeling, but it settles in your chest, that you are not just living here, but being remembered by the house. That every morning you rise, every pot you scrub, every fire you coax into brightness, leaves some mark not seen, not spoken, but kept. By midday, the barley is soft in the pot. The goats have quieted. The sun sits high and pale. You and Nayla return slowly. Your basket of spun will not yet full, but enough. Her son sleeps now, cheek resting on her shoulder. The longhouse welcomes you again, smelling of cooked grain and warm hide. You set the wool aside, lay down near the hearth, and rest your back against a folded pelt. Your feet are dusty. Your palms smell faintly of lanolin. Above you, smoke rises lazily into the smoke hole. A fly buzzes gently near the doorway. Somewhere behind you, a lullaby is being hummed, low and off-key, but soft enough to feel like belonging. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to stay still. The day will move. For now, you do not have to. Damp wool and birch smoke. A drowsy day inside a Neolithic longhouse. You do not sleep, but you dream a little. Eyes closed, chest still. You rest in that quiet valley between effort and idleness, where thoughts drift like pollen on still water. The hum of the longhouse has softened, tools put down, mouths full, children lulled by food and shadow. The midday hush has arrived. It doesn't announce itself, it spreads. A silent pact made by every living thing in the village. We will rest now, not because we are done, but because the sun says so. The hearth glows gently, fed with a handful of dry birch. It is not cooking now, only keeping. The barley pot has been pulled aside. Steam no longer rises, but warmth clings to its rim, and the smell of salt and sweet apple lingers in the air. The floor beneath you, packed clay and ash-dusted straw, radiates a subtle warmth, earth that remembers fire. You hear a single footstep nearby, deliberate and careful. Then a soft rustle of cloth. It's Larn, the elder with the cloud-colored beard and the stitched leather shoes no one else is allowed to touch. He does not speak, but sits beside you with the slowness of someone who remembers what it was like to stand easily. He carries a small clay bowl, one edge chipped but polished smooth with age. Inside the bowl, soft cheese, salted and flecked with chopped garlic root, laid on a torn barley bread. You accept it from him with a nod. This is how he shows care, by feeding, never asking. He chews slowly, watching the fire with eyes that have stared down wolves and storms, yet still seem amused by the way sparks chase one another. I heard the river has moved again, he says softly, after a long pause. Too much rain. It wants a new path. You swallow. Feel the crumbly cheese melt against the roof of your mouth. It always wants something, you reply. He nods. So do we. That is the end of the conversation. Not because you have nothing to say, but because it has already been said, just differently, in the way you tilt your head, or share the food, or offer him your place closer to the fire. Later, after the stillness, you rise again. The sun outside is high now, its light pale but direct, brushing the land in long, golden fingers. The mist is gone. In its place, small flies, dragonflies, the shimmer of heat above the barley stalks. The longhouse casts a sharp shadow to the east, cooling the dust that gathers beneath its eaves. You walk behind the house now, where the loom frame leans against the wall. The warp threads are tight, still smelling faintly of last month's nettle dye. You run your fingers along the weft. Goat wool, spun by your own hands last week, dyed with alderbark and elderberry. The colors are soft and mottled, brown gold, gray purple, the color of wet bark. You've not yet decided what this cloth will become. That is part of the pleasure. Beside the loom, the drying rack stands. Fish skins, barley cakes, sprigs of mint hang gently, stirred by the breath of afternoon. You check the fig slices, leathery, sweet-scented, tacky to the touch. Still not ready, but close. You pluck a mint leaf and crush it between your fingers. The smell reminds you of cold water, of the little green pool behind the ridge where you bathed last moon. Nayla joins you again, her arms full of sheared wool. Her son is with her, now awake, sticky with berry juice, clutching a wooden toy goat you carved for him in winter. She sets down the wool without speaking, then sits cross-legged beside the loom. The child crawls into her lap. You work side by side in silence, teasing knots from the fleece, plucking thorns from the curls, humming under your breath in uneven rhythm. She joins in sometimes, soft and low. He's too quiet, she murmurs eventually, brushing a hand over her son's head. He watches too much. Watching is good, you reply. Means he'll see the things others miss. She nods, but does not smile. Overhead, the sunlight plays through the eave slats, casting long lines across the dusty earth. The goats bleat softly from their paddock. A magpie hops along the roofline, its eyes too bright, too knowing. In the distance, the faint thump of stone on stone, the sound of someone napping flint into new blades. A sound that always makes you feel safe. So long as someone is shaping tools, the world remains intact. You and Nayla card the wool slowly. The child eventually drifts to sleep in her lap, his hands still gripping the toy goat. You lay the teased wool in a shallow wicker tray, sprinkle it with ground woad to set the color for later. Your hands are blue now, stained with history. As the sun begins to lean westward, you gather your basket and rise. The path to the stream is warm now, the mud dried into cracking ridges, the air dense with late summer scent, drying leaves, sun-baked stone, and the slightly sour breath of composting straw. You walk slowly, barefoot still. Each step presses the day deeper into your heels. At the stream's bend, beneath the shade of a gnarled hazel tree, the clay jars rest, half submerged. Cooling milk, soaking nettle cord, a pouch of dye solution. You check each one, then sit beside them, resting your back against the tree. The bark is rough and cool. The breeze is just strong enough to disturb the reeds, which hiss and rustle like old women whispering behind a door. You think of your mother here. Not often, but now and then. She used to sit beneath this tree. She plucked hazelnuts and taught you the difference between green ones and good ones. She showed you how to twist nettle fibers so they wouldn't bite. She smelled of clay and beeswax, and her voice always dropped when she spoke near water, as if the stream were listening, and she didn't want to interrupt. You close your eyes again, not to sleep, but to listen. The stream murmurs. A frog chirps. Far away, the crack of kindling. A raven calls from a dead branch. Time slows, then halts. There is no urgency here. The only rhythm is breath, and water, and memory. Eventually, you rise again. The jars are cool. You sling the pouch of dye over your shoulder, grip the milk jar with both hands. As you return to the longhouse, your arms wet from the splash, you pass the edge of the clearing where the children play, stick games and hiding behind stumps. One girl is spinning in circles, arms out, head tilted to the sky. You do not know her name. You do not need to. Back inside, the longhouse is dark again, but not cold. The fire has been fed. Someone has laid fresh bracken by the sleeping mats. You set the dye pouch near the hearth, the milk in its pit. Your feet are dusty, your shoulders warm, your mind still half under the hazel tree. You sit beside Larn again, though he is now dozing. His head tilts forward gently, like a clay statue, softened by time. You do not wake him. His dreams are his own. Instead, you take up your spindle. The wool is soft, loose, and already familiar in your hands. You begin to spin, slowly. The rhythm is steady, pull, twist, wind. The thread grows. It is uneven, imperfect, but it will hold. Outside, the sun lowers, casting gold across the woven fences. Inside, the smoke rises again, and the house grows quiet. This is midday, leaning toward afternoon. Nothing extraordinary has happened, and yet the world feels full. You watch the shadows shift. The child stirs. The goats sigh. Someone outside begins to sing a tune with no words, just sound and breath and a melody older than the roof. You keep spinning. You keep listening. Damp wool and birch smoke. A drowsy day inside a Neolithic longhouse. The sun has begun its long descent, though it does not fall quickly. It leans, hesitates, drawing golden threads across the village in soft angles. The shadows stretch, not harsh but drowsy, like old cats curling out across the clay and thatch. You are still beside the hearth, your spindle quiet now, your hands resting in your lap. The longhouse is lit with warmth, not brightness. The walls glow like worn honey, like old bark, like the inside of a tree remembered in dreams. Nayla has returned from the herb patch, her hands smelling of celery leaves and summer onion bulbs. She carries a small bundle wrapped in flax cloth, dried nettle, crushed mustard seed, fennel. She sets it gently beside the cookpot and lowers herself beside you with a small sound of contented ache. Her son is nearby, playing with twine, trying to knot it the way he's seen you do. His fingers fumble. He does not mind. I should mend his tunic, she murmurs, not moving. Let it wait, you answer. And it does. Outside, the light flickers through tall grasses. Dust rises in soft clouds where children's feet have stirred the earth. The goats have quieted. The chickens nestling into corners, shifting their weight with sleepy clicks and grumbles. The air is heavy with sun now, thick with the breath of warmth and soil. You rise and step into it slowly. The air is neither hot nor cold. It holds you like a shawl. You pass the loom, untouched since morning, and trail your fingers across the warped threads as you go. You do not need to speak to them. They will wait. Further beyond, past the tilled beds and drying racks, you walk toward the edge of the low forest, where the trees begin to lean together like old friends. Here, just past the shade line, the baskets are kept, woven from willow, some tight-lidded, some open. You lift the lid of one. Inside, apples, leathery skinned and bruised with age. Not fresh, but good for baking. You take 3, choosing by touch rather than sight, and tuck them into the crook of your arm. On the way back, you pass the clay oven. The fire has gone out, but left behind a warmth that still glows if you place your palm on the outer stone. A woman you know only in rhythm, Dara, a weaver with 2 grown sons, waves you over. She has already begun kneading a flatbread, barley flour dusting her sleeves like soft ash. Did you bring the apples? She asks, without looking up. You place them beside her gently. She nods. We'll mash them into the dough. Maybe a few crushed berries, too. You begin helping, not because she asks, but because you know the feel of dough in your hands is a kind of prayer, quiet, repetitive, forgiving. Together, you press the mash into the mix. The smell is sweet, faintly sour, clean. A little smoke, a little fruit, a little sweat. Real things. She presses the round into a broad leaf, brushes the top with water, and slips it into the hollow of the oven. It hisses slightly, then waits. You're welcome to stay, she says, eyes on the fire pit where coals rest under a thin cover of ash. You stay. The sun has dipped now, no longer leaning but lowering. The air changes subtly. The warmth remains, but the edge of the wind has cooled. Your arms feel it first, then your cheeks. Evening does not arrive like a guest. It arrives like a thought. Quiet, certain, already seated beside you. Children's laughter fades into murmurs. Some of them gather stalks, some wander toward the stream, some simply lie on the grass, staring at nothing, the way only children can. A boy sings something tuneless but comforting, a string of half-remembered lines from a story about a fox and a snake and a tree that walked. No one corrects him. No one needs to. Back inside the longhouse, the evening fire has begun to build again. Lawrence sits nearby, weaving cord from gut thread, his hand steady. A girl hands him a polished shell to tie to the end. He nods once, then continues. No ceremony, just approval. You sit near the door for a while, watching the light soften into gold, then into gray, then into something between the two. Nayla joins you, holding a bowl of lentil mash with roasted garlic stirred through. She gives you half. Her son eats his with two hands, laughing when it sticks to his chin. You wipe it away with the corner of your sleeve. He smiles, wide-mouthed, unashamed. As the shadows deepen, the bread from the oven is carried in on the broad leaf, now darkened with steam and scent. It is torn and passed, shared in pieces too large and too small, each one taken with thanks. Someone crushes herbs in a goat cheese. Someone pours warm milk into a clay cup. The fire crackles. The food is not rich, but it is whole. You eat slowly. The bread is soft, barely sweet from the apples, the edges touched by ash. The smell of it mingles with smoke and skin and wool and memory. After eating, the longhouse quiets, not into silence, but into closeness. Voices drop, movement slow. A child lies with her head in her mother's lap. A man stretches his legs, flexes his toes, then covers them with a pelt. Someone braids hair. Someone hums. Nayla speaks beside you, voice soft. He dreamed again last night. My boy. Same dream. Yes, but this time the hands were gentle. They only held him. You nod, not to understand, but to acknowledge. Dreams are not puzzles to be solved. They are stories told by the soul when no one is asking questions. Outside, a breeze stirs. The trees rustle in reply. Night animals shift, small ones with careful feet, owls with quiet hunger, beetles with no concern for anything but forward. You step outside once more. The air is sharp now, the sun barely a breath below the hills. The grass holds the last of the day's warmth in its roots. You kneel to gather a few stalks of dry nettle for the hearth. Easy kindling for the morning. Your fingers move carefully, even now, avoiding the sting. Old habits protect more than skin. As you rise, you look to the west. The sky is bruised with blue and lavender, streaked with the faintest orange blush. A few stars have begun to peer through. Not many, just enough to remind you that the world goes on beyond the hills. A voice calls gently from the longhouse, not urgent, not loud, just your name, spoken as an invitation. You turn. The doorway glows with firelight. The smell of smoke and bread clings to the air like a shawl. You return. Inside, your place is still there. A folded pelt, a rounded stone warmed from its place by the hearth, a small wooden comb resting nearby. The spindle lies where you left it. Someone has tucked the unfinished wool into its basket. You sit again, nearer the fire now. The children have quieted. Lauren has begun to speak, softly, slowly, telling a story older than anyone in the house. It is not told for understanding. It is told for memory, about a bear, a moon, and a woman who could speak to both. You listen, not because you need the story, but because the story needs you. The fire pops once. Nayla's son is asleep again, curled against her side. The bread has been eaten, the day has been lived, and now, slowly, gently, it is leaving. You press your palms to your knees. Feel the ache there, familiar and friendly. You breathe in the smoke. You taste the ghost of apple in your teeth. You feel your own hair against your shoulder, and it is enough. The sky outside is deep now, dark and still. Inside, the only light comes from the fire. Everything else is waiting. You lie down, not quickly. You pull the pelt over your legs. You rest your cheek on the woven mat. Cool now, but welcoming. You hear the crack of one final log settling. You hear the slow breath of the sleeping. You feel the longhouse, alive around you. Not a building, but a skin you live within. And as your eyes close, you do not think of tomorrow. You think only of this moment, where nothing is urgent, and everything belongs. Damp wool and birch smoke. A drowsy day inside a Neolithic longhouse. You do not fall asleep quickly. Sleep is not a switch in this place. It is a tide, slow, creeping, and as old as the soil pressed beneath your home. You lie still and listen. The night has settled. It has settled on your skin, which still holds the faint memory of sun and spinning wool. It has settled on the roof, where thatch softens the hum of wind and carries the smoke gently skyward. And it has settled in your chest, where your breath matches the rhythm of the longhouse itself, slow, steady, rooted in something deeper than thought. Beside you, someone shifts gently. A sigh, the rustle of wool, a small thump as an elbow brushes the wall. Someone further down laughs in their sleep. One short sound, like a dropped pebble, then quiet again. The hearth burns low now, just coals, no flame. It glows like an animal at rest, still warm, still watching, but without need to move. It has done its work. The fire will not go out. Someone always wakes before dawn to tend it. Above, the rafters are lost in shadow. You know their shapes by memory, not sight. The way they arch and hold the weight of roof and story. One beam creaks in the wind, slow and sure, like the house is exhaling. A dog is asleep at your feet. Its breath is soft, steady. Its warmth creeps toward your toes. You do not move. You are grateful. The boy, Nayla's son, murmurs again. She hums something back, wordless, just air shaped by comfort. He quiets. You hear her settle deeper into the straw. You stare toward the ceiling for a long while. You are not thinking in words. You are thinking in scent and warmth and the strange softness of stillness. Your hands, folded under your cheek, are dry from spinning. The tips of your fingers hold the faint scent of dye and nettle. You think of the sky outside. Stars now, spread wide and sharp. You cannot see them from inside the longhouse, but you know they are there. They are always there. They do not mind being unseen. You think of the paths beyond the trees, of the places you walked last moon, the shallow stream where trout flicked like silver leaves, the field where the barley bent in winds that smelled of the sea. You think of the quiet graves on the ridge, where stones mark only absence. You remember one stone in particular, carved with a simple line, a mark of memory, not name. Beneath it lies your brother, or perhaps only your memory of him, which is not the same. You do not cry. That was many winters ago. But tonight, as the fire settles, you feel his absence gently, like a space beside you no longer needed. The longhouse breathes around you. You feel it, not metaphor, not idea, but real. The air shifts. The smoke sways. The weight of the roof hums faintly in the bones of the walls. You have lived here since you could walk. You have known no other ceiling. And yet the night still feels new. Somewhere outside, an owl calls, a single clean note. It rings through the trees like a thread drawn through cloth. Afterward, silence again. You hear a reed clatter against the eave. The wind lifts it slightly, then lets it fall. You close your eyes again. The darkness is not black. It is full of ash and breath and old dreams worn thin by retelling. You dream, eventually. In a dream, the longhouse is empty, but warm. The fire glows, and the walls are familiar, but no one speaks. You walk from one end to the other, touching the rafters. Each one speaks a word you cannot remember when you wake. In the dream, your mother is sitting by the door. She does not look up, but you know she's glad to see you. She is weaving something from thread made of mist. In a dream, the sky inside the house is full of stars, and the stars are close enough to touch. One of them lands on your hand and becomes a seed. You wake just before dawn. You always wake before the others. Not out of duty, out of rhythm. The longhouse is dim. The coals are barely red, but the light is coming. You can feel it pressing gently against the edge of the sky. The air is cool. Your breath clouds briefly, then fades. You sit up slowly, drawing the pelt around your shoulders. The dog stirs and thumps its tail once, then sighs. You step quietly to the hearth and stir the coals with a curved stick. Ash swirls, then settles. You blow gently. The ember catches. You add a pinch of moss, a splinter of birch bark. It flares, then flickers, then steadies. You feed the fire. One stick, then another. Light returns, not with drama, but with certainty. Nayla stirs. Her boy mumbles. Larn snores once, then stops. Someone coughs. The longhouse is waking again. But for now, in this moment, it is just you and the fire and the soft breath of the new day. And it is enough. Damp wool and birch smoke. A drowsy day inside a Neolithic longhouse. The river wakes before the sun. It winds through the damp morning hush like a whispered line of thought, its curves soft and knowing, its currents slow but certain. The reeds that fringe its banks are heavy with dew, their thin blades trembling in the cool air. Above, the sky is pale and wide, brushed faintly with clouds that do not threaten rain. She kneels at the water's edge, clay pot resting against her thigh, hands cupped and still. She is not young, but not yet old. Her fingers are strong and stained with dye. Her shoulders remember the weight of baskets, of grain sacks, of her children, long grown. Her name is not written down, not sung in legend, not carved into anything that will last. But she is known. She is one of the first to tame this land, not with stone or sword, but with patient repetition. Behind her, the longhouse breathes. It is one of 6, lying along the curve of the bank, their narrow ends facing the river as if listening. Smoke rises from a few, thin and gray. Children's voices drift softly from somewhere near the animal pens. A dog barks once, then is silenced by a gentle hand. The woman dips her hands into the river, letting the water cover her wrists. It is cold, but not unkind. She doesn't flinch. Instead, she watches the tiny fish flicker near the reeds, the way the sunlight touches the surface in a pattern like woven cloth. Her name does not matter, but her work does. She belongs to a people who do not see themselves as builders of monuments. They do not raise walls of stone or paint gods on cliffs. Their legacy is quieter: seeds, fences, bread, and memory. Across the land, through forests and floodplains, across hills and along rivers like this one, they have begun to settle. Not all at once, not loudly, but with steadiness. They dig, plan, and stay. Some will call them the linear pottery people, long after they are gone. Not for what they believed or where they walked, but for the patterns they scratched in a clay, neat, deliberate lines pressed by fingertip or bone. She does not think of herself as part of culture. She thinks only of her chores, her aches, her children's children, and the line of pots waiting near the hearth to be patched and filled. But in her body, she carries a change, one that moves across continents with the slow certainty of seasons. She stands, brushing her damp hands against her tunic. The fabric clings slightly, woven flax, dyed soft brown with alder bark, smelling of wood smoke and river grass. A leather cord at her waist holds a small blade, more bone than stone now, worn smooth from years of use. She touches it absently, then begins the walk back to the house. It is not far. The path is packed earth, bordered with crushed nettle and small stones pressed flat by years of bare feet. The house is long, low, and built of timber and thatch, its walls daubed with clay and straw. The doorway is open, and inside, light dances across the wall from the fire's low flicker. Her son is there, crouched beside the hearth, blowing gently on the embers. His daughter, 5 winters old, is rolling a clay bead between her palms, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. She smiles but says nothing. Instead, she lifts the pot and begins to fill it with dried barley. She adds water slowly, watching the surface rise, then sets it near the fire. A pinch of salt, a few shreds of last year's dried apple. The motions are automatic, but not careless. This longhouse has stood for 17 winters. Its beams are black with soot and smooth with time. In the far corner, under a shallow shelf, rests the body of her husband, buried 5 winters ago when the ice came early and the goats miscarried. His grave is not marked, but she knows exactly where it is. When the floor was laid, she chose that corner because it is near the morning light. He would have liked that. Her people have begun to bury their dead beneath their homes. It is a quiet revolution, though they do not call it that. Once, the dead were taken into the woods, laid in hollowed trees, or left beneath stones. But now they stay. The house becomes both cradle and grave. The living walk over the bones of those who fed them. It is not superstition. It is memory, made literal. She does not fear the dead. She talks to him sometimes, when no one is listening. Not aloud, but in the way she stirs the pot or ties a knot. In the way she teaches her granddaughter to grind grain. In the way she braids her hair, slowly before bed. The house is a memory made of wood and silence. Outside, her son begins to dig a post hole for a new fence. The earth is soft from last night's rain. He works with a polished stone adze, the kind that comes from the green hills far to the west. It is beautiful, but he does not treat it like treasure. It is a tool. It cuts clean and fast. She remembers when those tools first came to the river villages. Traders brought them, quiet men with worn sandals and bags full of flint, beads, salt, and rumors. No one could understand everything they said, but the gestures were clear. She traded cheese and wool for a greenstone blade once. It lasted longer than 3 of the bone ones. The world is growing, and the boundaries of what is known shift like water. There is talk of other villages beyond the trees, places where the houses are built in circles, or where people bury their dead standing upright. One trader spoke of a place where the sun rises behind 2 stones, and in that light, people dance in silence. She does not know if it is true, but she likes the image. Her people do not dance much, but they sing, quietly, mostly when working. She hums now, a low tune with no words, passed down from the old women. Her granddaughter hums it too, though off-key. The fire crackles gently. The pot begins to steam. Her son comes in, wipes his forehead, drinks from the water jar. "Fence is holding," he says between breaths. She nods. He sits beside her. They eat together, scooping from the same pot with carved wooden spoons. The child chews slowly, watching them both. "You'll need more barley for winter," she says after a pause. "I'll speak with the southern village," he replies. "They may trade. We've enough salt to spare." She nods again. She has always liked the southern village. They grow good onions. When the meal is done, she rises slowly. Her knees ache. Her hands are stiff, but she still moves with purpose. She takes a half-finished pot from the shelf and begins to scrape a new pattern into its side with a boar tusk stylus. Lines, curves, cross-hatches. No one told her what they mean, but they are always drawn the same way. Slow, careful, rhythmic. A mark of continuity, of identity. Later, when she dies, someone will recognize her hand by the line she drew near the base. Like a thumbprint in time. She does not think of herself as an artist, or as a founder of anything. She is a woman who wakes with the river, who keeps a house warm, who remembers to sprinkle herbs beneath the floor to keep mice away. But still, when she scratches the pot, when she watches her son repair the fence, when she hums the tune her grandmother taught her, she feels something else beneath it all. Not pride, not ambition, something quieter, belonging, not just to this land, or this longhouse, or this family, but to the long thread that connects one hand to the next, one pot to another, one river bend to the next. Outside, the light shifts, the river darkens, the birds return to the trees, and inside, the pot is nearly done. She draws one last line, then sets it gently beside the fire, and waits. Damp wool and birch smoke. A drowsy day inside a Neolithic longhouse. The land does not announce it is being changed. It doesn't speak when the forests are thinned or when the roots of einkorn and barley stretch in a ground that once knew only moss and pine. The rivers don't protest when their fish are trapped and smoked over willow branches. Even the hills seem content to watch, rolling on in silence, as they always have. And yet something has shifted. Across hundreds of miles, from the broad, winding Danube to the shadowed woodlands of what will one day be called Poland and Germany, the shape of life itself has begun to bend, ever so slightly, toward the same slow rhythm. At first glance, the fields seem unremarkable. Small plots of soil, churned by hand with polished stone blades, bordered by lines of willow and packed earth. No walls, no banners, no names carved into gates. But if you walk these paths year after year, you begin to notice what is not returning. The wild pigs are fewer. The birch saplings are thinner. And where once mushrooms rose thick in spring, now there are flints, bones, shards of broken pottery pressed into the dirt. This is not a conquest. It is a settling. The people here, known much later as the linear pottery culture, have no kings, no armies. They do not build shrines of marble or declare their claims aloud, but they stay, and they build homes where homes have never stood. Each generation adds something, a new beam, a better fence, a sharper blade, a story better told, and they plant. That alone changes everything. Where once there were only gatherers and hunters, now there are hoers, harvesters, caretakers of seed. Women who know when the ground softens just enough to receive rye. Children who learn to recognize the texture of wheat kernels as they dry in the sun. Elders who track the moon not for hunting patterns, but for planting days. It is, in some ways, an audacity to believe that you might shape the land itself, that what once gave freely can now be coaxed, year after year, into a rhythm you understand. But it is a quiet audacity, and a patient one. No one remembers the name of the first woman who planted grain here. Perhaps she didn't even call it planting. Perhaps she simply dropped seeds beside a stream and noticed that they came back the next year. Perhaps she smiled to herself and said nothing at all. But now, entire families sleep beneath rafters made from trees cut for their shape, not just for their fall. They measure their years in baskets and harvests, in the weight of grain carried home from the field, in the shine of a polished spindle. And they do not do this alone. Trade paths have opened, not grand roads, but worn trails between river bends and ridges, marked by half-remembered stories and the shape of the stars. People walk for days to reach another settlement, not to conquer, but to visit. They bring obsidian, beads, animal skins, axes of greenstone, shaped with more care than some men shape their thoughts. They trade salt for wool, cheese for flint cores, news for silence. There are no marketplaces, just conversations. A woman stands at the edge of her field with a bowl of fermented berries and offers it to a stranger with a cracked blade. She does not speak his dialect, but she points to the sky, to the stream, to the hearth smoke curling from a roof. It is enough. Some settlements are larger now. 6, 8, even 12 longhouses in a gentle arc beside a stream. They do not form cities. They do not even call themselves villages. They are clusters of belonging, held together by lineage, labor, and the memory of winter. Even without kings, there is hierarchy. Some houses are longer than others. Some fires burn warmer, longer into the night. Some women wear beads of foreign stone and sleep near the hearth. Others curl beside the door, where the draft is sharp and the noise is louder. But this order is not declared. It is grown into the floor, pressed into the woven mats. A child understands it before she can speak it. Power is not absent. It is quiet. Perhaps it is held by the woman who knows how to heal with nettle and bark, or by the old man who speaks during funerals, not because he must, but because his silences beforehand make his voice heavy with meaning, or by the boy who listens better than the others and remembers things no one asked him to. The graves tell the rest. There are people buried with care, polished axe heads placed beside their hands, deer bone pendants laid across their chest, ochre dust sprinkled around the skull. Others lie plain, curled into the earth with no more than a shell bead or a strip of bark. And still others are missing altogether, lost to time or to customs not yet written. This too is a mark of change. Even the way people die now ties them more closely to place. They are no longer scattered to the forests or the rivers. They are folded into the earth beneath their homes or in the clearings nearby. They remain. Their bodies speak silently to the soil, to the living who walk above them, grinding grain, carving bone, tending fire. In this way, each longhouse becomes a story made of wood and blood. It has walls, a roof, a memory. Some have been rebuilt on the same site 2, 3, even 4 times, each one carefully aligned to the last, not by measurement, but by habit, by sun, by the way shadows fall at midsummer. The same hearth, the same doorway, the same morning light spilling onto the same packed clay. It is not permanence. It is rhythm. They are not trying to stop time. They are trying to move with it, to shape it gently around their days. There are no kings here, no coins, no scrolls, but there are markers of power all the same. A house with finer beams, a child with a necklace made of 100 snail shells, a burial with a deer antler laid gently beneath the skull. These signs are not shouted. They are understood. Sometimes there is violence. A field is burned. A longhouse collapses under suspicious weight. A mass grave is found centuries later, skeletons piled together, some with broken skulls, some with arms raised in a gesture of defense. But even here, there is no trumpet, no tale of conquest, only a pause in the pattern, a moment when the quiet rhythm is broken. And then, slowly, inevitably, it begins again. Another longhouse is built. Another spindle is carved. Another fire lit in the morning hush. The forests shrink, but not quickly. The rivers bend, but not all at once. The land allows itself to be coaxed. Or perhaps it simply waits. There are no monuments, no grand circles of stone, no towering statues, no tablets etched with law, but there are pots, thousands of them, made by hand, scratched with lines, filled with grain, carried, dropped, mended, forgotten. They are found centuries later, buried in layers of ash and soil. Some hold the fingerprints of the makers. Some bear the same pattern repeated over hundreds of miles. Lines, curves, cross-hatching, nothing written, and yet everything is said. The people who made these lines did not build empires, but they built kitchens. They built homes. They built the idea that land could be tended and returned to, that food could be stored, that memory could be folded into clay. And that is a kind of greatness, a quiet one. Damp wool and birch smoke, a drowsy day inside Neolithic longhouse. Long before fences divided fields, and long before flags marked borders, people drew circles in the land. They did not carve them in stone or raise them for the sky to see. They dug them with antler picks and flint tools, with shovels made of shoulder blades, with hands that had already planted barley, tended fires, and stitched flax thread. It was slow work, patient work, the kind of work that didn't promise reward, only the hush of completion. Across what would one day be England, France, Germany, and beyond, people labored for days, perhaps weeks, to shape the earth into rings. Not perfect rings, not geometric, but lived circles, walked judged by sun and wind, traced by memory and footstep. Their edges were shallow ditches, carved in arcs, with raised banks of displaced soil. These were not walls. They had no gates, and the ditches were not continuous. They had breaks, causeways, left purposefully like open thoughts. They are now called causewayed enclosures, though no one then called them anything at all. We do not know why they were made, but they were made, and that in itself is a message. They appear where the people who ground grain and built longhouses also lived. Sometimes they stood near settlements, sometimes apart, sometimes on high ground with a view, sometimes tucked behind trees, quiet and unspectacular. There is no consistency, only the act of circle making, repeated across years, across places, across people who never met. To dig one was no small thing. Earth is stubborn. Even with good tools, it must be coaxed and broken. The soil gives slowly, and yet these people dug, together, not for shelter, not for defense, and not for water. And then they stopped. They used the space, perhaps briefly. Then they abandoned it, but not without leaving something behind. In many of these enclosures, archaeologists have found layers, scraps, fragments, gestures. A broken pot, placed upright in a ditch. A skull, cracked cleanly, resting beside a jawbone. Bones of animals, carefully arranged. Antlers burned, then buried. Shell beads that might once have been worn around a neck. Not trash, not quite. Not burial, not entirely. Something in between. A kind of offering, perhaps, or a kind of forgetting. One can imagine a woman standing in the grass near the enclosure's edge. She holds a cracked bowl in her hands, one that fed her family for years. She stands for a while. Then she drops into the ditch. It breaks. She does not cry. She walks away. One can imagine a boy asked to carry a goat's skull to the ring. He does not ask why. He places it on the mound, facing west. He thinks about a game he played earlier that day. He scratches his knee. He leaves. It is not always about belief. Sometimes it is about habit, about shape, about the strange comfort of returning to a place and doing something deliberate with your hands. Later, the wind moves over the ditch. Rain falls. Grass returns. But the shape remains. What did they see in the circle? A reflection of the sun, of the moon, of the cycle of hunger and harvest, of birth and winter, of flame and ash. Did they walk its edge in silence or in song? Did they mark seasons here, or mourn someone gone, or simply listen for things that could not be heard elsewhere? The evidence does not answer. It only whispers. Some enclosures have signs of feasting, thousands of animal bones, charred and gnawed, mixed with broken pottery. Some show careful arrangement. Others are chaotic, layered with waste and ceremony indistinguishably. Perhaps this was the point. A place where the line between sacred and ordinary was not so sharp. A space where people could set something down and let the earth take it. Perhaps they came only once a year. Perhaps they came alone. Perhaps they danced. Or perhaps they simply sat. Some circles were expanded over time, added to, reshaped, revised. Others were abandoned within a generation. There is no single story, only a repeated act. Digging, marking, leaving. The enclosures did not protect. They invited. That in itself is unusual. Most human architecture begins with fear, walls, locks, thresholds. But these circles remained open. Their gaps, those causeways, were not flaws. They were intentions. They allowed people in, and perhaps allowed things out. Some suggest they were calendars, aligned with solstice light. Others suggest they were arenas for gathering or contest. Still others say they were thresholds between the living and the dead. All may be true, none may be, but they were used and then left. That is what lingers most. The absence. These were not monuments that lasted. They were gestures that faded, as if their makers understood that permanence is not always the point. That sometimes the act of making, the labor, the gathering of hands and breath and time, that alone is the meaning. It is easy to imagine one last group standing there, at the edge of a now quiet circle. The pots have been placed, the food shared, the fire has died down. One woman picks up a child. A man gathers the leftover cloth. They look back once, not out of sadness, but to fix the shape in their minds. Then they walk away. Years pass. The grass returns. Later, someone else walks by, sees a line in the earth, a hollow, a ring of unfamiliar stones. They do not know what it was, but they feel something still there, like the warmth left in a seat just vacated. Now, these circles lie beneath fields and farms, beneath hedges and highways. They are rarely visible, but from the sky, especially when the crops grow uneven or the soil darkens just so, they emerge again. Ghost patterns in grain, silent messages from a time that never raised its voice. They are not famous. Most people do not know their names, but they are older than most cities and shaped with just as much care. Perhaps the irony is this, that people who left so little behind have left something so persistent, a mark without a message, a space that still asks. And perhaps in this forgetting, there is a kind of truth. After all, we remember the kings and battles, but the people who dug these ditches, who made circles instead of thrones, changed the shape of the land in ways that endure, not in name, but in rhythm. They did not speak in monuments. They spoke in earth, and the earth remembers. Damp wool and birch smoke. A drowsy day inside a Neolithic longhouse. There is no throne in the longhouse, no seat higher than the others, no crown, no carved name. But there is a fire, and where you sleep in relation to it says everything. Some sleep near the center, where it is warmest, driest, safest. They do not stir in the night from cold. Their bowls are filled first. Their cloaks are of thicker wool, their tools less worn. Others sleep by the door, where smoke drifts downward, where the night wind slips through the cracks in the wattle and brings the bite of dew, where you must rise often to tend the goats, chase off the dogs, or welcome a guest you did not invite. This too is a kind of order, not declared, not enforced, but remembered in bones, in breath, in the quiet way someone steps aside when another enters the room, in who is allowed to speak at the firelight, and who is told to listen. It is the earliest shape of inequality, not forged in metal, not declared in stone, but grown gently into the body of daily life. Archaeologists do not find empires here, but they find difference, not just between one group and another, but between neighbors, between those who share the same hearth and the same winter. A burial in a long trench, rich with objects, polished axes, beads, pottery with careful incisions. Another burial nearby, bare, with a chipped bowl and a single tooth from a pig. The bones tell the rest. In some skeletons, long limbs, thick joints, even teeth. Signs of steady nutrition, labor-shaped but not strained. In others, stunted growth, enamel worn before its time, joints grooved with hardship, signs that not everyone ate the same bread, or if they did, some received less. These were not nobles and peasants, not yet, but they were not equal either. In some long houses, a raised platform lines the back wall. There, the mat is thicker, the air is clearer, smoke rises, not falls. In other parts of the house, you sleep beside the clay wall, where it sweats in summer and freezes in frost. The division is spatial, not spoken, but it is learned early. A child knows where she is allowed to sit. She knows which cup is hers. And which is her elder sister's, the one carved with swirls and polished with oil. She knows whose hands are soft and whose are cracked. She notices, even if no one tells her, that her cousin's tunic has a fringe and hers does not. This is how class begins. Not with ownership, but with patterns. Who fetches water? Who tend the fire? Who listens when stories are told? Who is told the story of the bear? And who is asked only to sit still while it is spoken? Even the tools speak. Some flint blades are sharp, perfectly struck, barely used. Others are worn to the hilt, their edges resharpened again and again until the blade resembles nothing but memory. The better tools pass down with care. The others are discarded behind the animal pens. And still, there are no kings, no graves with gold, no inscriptions, no statues, just a slow, spreading difference, whispered into the walls of houses, pressed into the hands of children, marked in the spacing of sleeping mats. Even the way you are mourned carries weight. Some are buried beneath the house, their bones warmed by firelight for weeks after. Others are taken to the edge of the woods and laid with simplicity. A few leaves, a small bowl, the shape of their body remembered only by those who were close. And sometimes, no one digs a grave at all. Even in this early world, where survival depends on each other, not all are missed the same. Still, it would be wrong to call this cruelty. It is more like gravity, a slow pull toward custom, toward the arrangement of space and story that begins to suggest who matters more and who waits for warmth. Even the hearth says so. It does not judge, but it gives more heat to those who sit closest. And yet, there are ironies. Sometimes, the one nearest the fire does not speak. She only watches. Her hands, uncalloused, fold wool into patterns. Her gaze is distant, her children well fed, but her words are few. While near the door, a boy tells stories, rich and strange, with gestures and voices and half-remembered dreams. He knows how to make the little ones laugh. He knows when the old ones are about to rise. He knows how to gather attention without asking for it. He will never sit near the hearth, not unless something shifts. But for now, his breath fogs at the threshold while his stories keep the house whole. Power moves oddly, even in small houses. Sometimes, the woman who cleans the hearth each day knows every birth and death in the village, and the seeds that grew poorly 3 winters ago. Her mind is a ledger. She is not revered, but she is necessary. The man with the good axe rarely uses it. It was his grandfather's, traded for salt and given with ceremony. It sits above the sleeping mat, its polish never dulled. He sharpens it twice each year and carries it when he visits others. It is a token, more than a tool. It reminds others that his family does not need to cut wood. They have sons to do it for them. When feasts are held, small ones for the return of a cousin or the naming of a child, it is the women near the hearth who stir the pot, who add herbs not because they must, but because they can. The meal tastes richer, but no one names the difference. And no one talks about who eats first. It is simply known. This world is not cruel. It is only beginning to sort itself. Like a field cleared of stones, it does not yet have furrows, but the soil has been turned. Some parts are softer. Some hold water better. Some seeds fall closer to the sun. In this way, the first class is formed. Not by decree, but by habit, by distance from a fire, by closeness to the door. And yet, no one builds a wall. No locks are made. No guards are posted. The door is covered in hide, not barred. The fields are worked side by side. The goats bleat without titles. It is possible that no one notices, that the woman near the hearth believes she is simply warm because she rose early and chose the spot, that the man at the door thinks he prefers the cool air, the way it smells in the morning, the silence. But their children will notice, and their children's children will build houses with raised platforms, and hearths that sit within circles of stone, and doorways that narrow before they widen again. They will begin to say, "This is our land," instead of "This is where we live." And one day, someone will sit on a higher bench, and speak more than he listens. But for now, in the longhouse, the fire burns low. The door creaks gently in the breeze. The dog shifts in its sleep. The wool waits to be spun, and the silence between sleeping mats holds the shape of a story not yet told. Damp wool and birch smoke. A drowsy day inside a Neolithic longhouse. The grass covers everything now. It brushes the knees in late summer, soft and dry and golden, rippling like quiet breath along the crest of the hill. Wind presses through in long sighs. Bees stagger from flower to flower, indifferent to the shape beneath their feet. But the circle is still there. Not a ring of stone, not a monument, just a soft depression, a swelling in the earth. You wouldn't notice it if you didn't already know where to look. Even then, it might take a moment. A hesitation in the slope, a bend in the light, a place where the green grows a little richer after the rain. It is very old and very quiet. No one speaks of it anymore. The story it once held was folded away with the bones of its makers. But something lingers, a texture in the soil, a hush in the air that holds itself differently than the fields below. In the mornings, when the mist coils low and clings to the reed grass, the shape becomes clearer. Not sharp, not bold, just clear, a memory held in water. They once dug here, not deeply, not fast. They worked with antler, bone, flint, tools shaped for daily life, now turned toward the making of something else. Something without corners, without roofs, without walls. The ditches form concentric lines, gently interrupted by openings, causeways, where no soil was disturbed, as if the space had been meant to breathe, or to remember how to let someone in. No palisade ever stood. No stones were raised. Only these curves, these gaps, these invitations. They dug, they gathered, and then they walked away. And what happened in between, the grass no longer tells. But in the earth, when it was opened again, things remained. Here, a pig jaw, clean, curved, resting on a bed of clay. There, a pot, its rim broken, placed upright in the ditch, its base hollowed out like a breath that had been held too long. Bone tools, animal skulls, char grain, a deer antler, blackened and cracked, tucked into a corner like a thought deferred. A woman's jawbone, placed alongside a spindle whorl, threaded through time with no cloth remaining. Nothing in rows, nothing in lines, everything scattered like seeds caught in wind. They say it was not trash, but they do not say what it was. The place was used and not used, visited and not lived in, a location chosen, returned to, then abandoned. Sometimes after a year, sometimes after generations, sometimes it seems in the span of a single season. There is no writing to explain it. No carvings, no gods, no names, just a shape, and what the hands left behind. In one corner, near the curve of the western ditch, the bones of cattle were found, carefully laid, their joints unbroken, as if they had not been eaten, only offered. The grass grows well there now, taller than elsewhere. No one knows why. In another, an infant's tooth. Alone, nearby, a shallow fire pit, ringed with stones that are no longer sharp, just warm with memory. Ash still sleeps beneath the surface. When it rains, the earth here smells different, like something long cooled, like a story whose ending was forgotten halfway through. It may have been ritual, or gathering, or neither, but it was deliberate. The lines were drawn with care. The digging was coordinated. Someone said, "Here," and others followed. That much is known. But whether they walked the circles in silence or with drum beats, whether they sang or wept or simply stood, no sound remains. Only the hush, only the weight of stillness. Sometimes on summer nights, when the moon rises full and slow, casting silver across the field, the animals go quiet as they pass the circle. The birds avoid landing. A sheep once broke from its path and would not cross the causeway, no matter how gently called. It may mean nothing. but might be memory. Not the kind people keep, the kind the land holds. Not far from here, beneath another field, another circle rests. A mirror of this one, but with a different rhythm. More breaks, less depth. It is as if someone remembered the shape and made it again from memory. Different, but still itself. The shape echoes. From hill to hill, from region to region. Like breath passed between strangers who will never meet. They all dug circles, but none the same. Some enclosures are filled with feasting. Layers of bone, charred wood, pots shattered with intention. Others are empty, bare of use, holding only soil and the soft pressure of time. All are lined with memory, but none with explanation. Perhaps the point was not to explain. Perhaps the circle is not a sentence, but a pause. A place to stop and place something down. A burden, a name, a bowl once used for grief. Perhaps they gathered not to say, but to be, and to leave something behind, even if it cannot speak, even if no one came back for it, even if it disappeared. Now, in the low light of dusk, the circle falls into shadow again. The grass sighs and bends. The wind gathers small secrets from the edges, where stones hide beneath soil like teeth. A fox passes by without pausing. An owl watches from a distance. The clouds drift slowly, as if uncertain whether to cover the moon. And for a moment, the whole field seems to wait. Not for an answer, not for an audience, just for the quiet to settle once more. Damp wool and birch smoke. A drowsy day inside Neolithic longhouse. The pot had been shaped slowly, pinched from coils, smoothed with bone, thickened at the lip so it would not crack in fire. Its sides bore the warmth of hands, pressed not for beauty, but for knowing. It rested for a day in shade before firing, near the hearth, while the wool was being spun and the grain was being ground, while a child sang half a song and the dog twitched in its sleep, while someone sharpened a blade and someone else added nettle to a stew already older than the day. And when it was dry enough, almost but not quite bone hard, a hand reached again for its surface. Not to fix it, not to shape it, but to speak. A finger, pressed, then pulled. A line, then another, slightly curved. A notch, a dot. Not words, not even symbols, but marks. A pattern, something chosen. A rhythm in clay. The pot was not unique. Dozens like it were buried in the ditch. Some broken, some whole, some with elaborate, cross-hatched designs, some with simple swirls or zigzags, some with nothing at all. But even the plainest pots bore signs of their maker. A thumbprint near the base, a fingernail ridge beneath the handle, a smudge from a hand that had also tended fire, or wiped a child's face, or caught a falling cup before it shattered. They are still there. You can see them now, centuries later, in museums, in drawers, in photographs taken in careful light. Not just the shape of the pot, but the shape of the gesture that made it. It is tempting to ask, what does it mean? But perhaps it was never meant to mean. Perhaps it was only meant to mark, to say, I was here. This was mine. This held grain once, or broth, or rainwater. This touched the earth, then fire, then mouth. And then, when its rim cracked, it was carried to a ditch, to a ring, to a place where other things were left, and placed with care, not discarded, not hidden, just set down, like a thought. The woman who made the pot is long gone. Her name, if she had one beyond gesture and tone, is not remembered, but her hand is, pressed there, just below the rim, firm and small, with a twist of the finger as it pulled away. A mark that was not necessary, but made, and repeated. The same curl appears on another pot, dug from another village, across the river. It is not the same hand, but it is the same motion, past, perhaps, like a tune hummed across seasons. Unwritten, unexplained, but known. The marks change slightly over time. Early ones are lines. Later ones become spirals. Some are bold, others faint, like the hesitation of a person who knows the clay is watching. One pot shows rows of notches, as if something had been counted. Another bears no pattern at all, but inside, just beneath the rim, a tiny star was pressed with a carved stick. There is no record of why. Sometimes the pots were buried upright, sometimes upside down. Some held bones, others held ash, still others held nothing but dust and a silence that does not settle. A child's pot, smaller than most, bears a row of thumbprints around its belly, 5 in a circle, the 6th smeared, as if the child moved or laughed or turned her head too soon. Who brought it to the enclosure? Her mother? Her brother? Did they speak as they placed it in the ground? Or did they look away? The firing pits are shallow, just scooped earth, dry dung brush. The pots were baked slowly, unevenly. Some cracked, some darkened at one side. Even in failure, they were kept. A broken pot might be patched with pitch and twine, or given to a child for play, or used to scoop ash. Sometimes, even the broken ones were buried, even the ones that never held anything, as if the attempt alone was worth remembering. In a museum drawer, one pot is darker than the rest. Its walls are thick, heavy, its base uneven, but along the side, running from top to bottom in a slow, deliberate wave, is a series of cross-hatched lines, drawn with something fine and sharp. They are not random. They have rhythm. One line, pause, too short, one long, cross. Then again, the hand that made them had done so before. You can feel it even now. In a way, the depth of the incision varies, not from uncertainty, but from tired confidence. Like the voice of someone who has told the same story too many times, but still tells it. What were the patterns for? Were they just habit? Beauty? A way to pass the time while waiting for the fire to catch? Do they mark ownership, clan, the seasons? Or are they just comfort? Some lines resemble barley stalks, others fish bones. Others seem to spiral like water flowing around a stone. It is tempting to think they meant something. But perhaps the mystery is not that we do not understand. Perhaps the mystery is that they didn't need us to. Imagine a morning. Cool. Gray. The kind of dampness that softens bark and bends grass before the sun has risen. A woman sits by the doorway of her longhouse. A pot rests between her knees. She draws a line, then a second. The dog sleeps. The fire crackles low. The sky is pale with waiting. She presses her nail into the clay, then her thumb. She does not speak. She does not need to. The pot will say enough. Now the pot is in the earth, or in a drawer, or in a glass case, labeled and numbered. But the marks remain. They do not explain. They do not argue. They simply hold, like the inside of a longhouse, like the smell of hearth smoke and woven wool, like a song hummed under breath, passed down not in melody, but in motion. There is no translation, only texture, only the whisper of a finger pulled through clay, only the silence of a pot cooling in soil, only the soft weight of a vessel once filled, now empty. Still, waiting, damp wool and birch smoke. A drowsy day inside a Neolithic longhouse. At the edge of the ridge, the sun used to set differently. It still drops, of course, still sinks behind the low hills, casting long shadows across the barley stubble and turning the thatched rooftops gold. But something's gone now, something that once happened in the pause between the day and the dark. A gathering, a watching, a waiting. No one remembers the exact place. Not anymore. The earth has shifted too many times. Stones have been moved. Trees have fallen and grown again. But when you stand quietly, just before the light breaks, you can feel the outline of it. An open space that feels hollow, like a held breath. Somewhere here, they once came to watch the sun. Not every evening. Not always. But often enough that the ground remembers. You can still find faint marks if the light is just right. Dips in the grass. Stones that are less random than they first appear. A scatter of charcoal beneath the roots. A curve of soil that holds warmth longer after the sun has gone. They didn't build much. A ring of logs. maybe, or a low wall of packed earth and basket-woven panels. Something just tall enough to break the wind, just close enough to draw in warmth. They brought fire with them, and sat close, and waited, not for anything to happen, just to see the light fall through the trees. The last light, the last warmth, and then they would go. No one knows what it meant. There are no carvings here, no graves, no tools left behind with purpose, only soft ash, burnt bone, a bead once, a shell far from any shore. It was not a home. It was not a field. It was something in between, a place for in-betweens. Some say the stones were set to catch the solstice light, that the sun would rise between them on a certain morning and cast a line down the center of the space. But the stones are gone now, or perhaps never there. Maybe it was the trees that marked the day, their long shadows tracing arcs that the people understood with their bodies, not their words. Maybe they followed the birds instead, their quiet migration overhead, a turn in the sky, a thinning of sound, the first call of geese beyond the mist. Or perhaps it was the scent of the grass when it yellowed, the taste of the first stored pear, the way the evening chill crept into wool, even when the fires still burned strong. Some things do not need measuring. Some rhythms are felt in the joints and knees, in a breath drawn deeper as the season shifts, in the silence that falls earlier and stays longer. That silence was welcome here. They did not dance, or if they did, they left no mark. But someone traced lines in the ash with a stick, loops and spirals, drawn with idle fingers. A child, maybe, or someone waiting, someone remembering. The fire always burned low by then, not the cooking fire of the house. A leaner flame, cracking, but not roaring, enough to see each other's faces, but not enough to chase away the stars. The wood was chosen carefully, birch mostly, dry, sweet-smelling, soft enough to catch quickly, strong enough to last the hour. Sometimes they brought small bundles to place beside it, dried herbs, a knotted string, a bird's feather, things without names, laid down without explanation. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. You could hear the wind pass through the pines, hear the creak of a branch, the distant, rhythmic clatter of something settling deeper into soil. And when the sun dipped below the ridge, when its last line of gold slipped across the surface of the fire, someone would add a final stick. One more breath of light. Then it was done. They may have returned the next night, or not for a season. Some gatherings may have been large. Others, only 2 or 3. A child and her grandmother. A man alone, holding something he did not wish to carry back into the house. There is no record of what was said, but in the charcoal, mixed with the ash, they found a shard of fired clay. Not part of a pot. Too flat, too thin. On one side, a small mark. Not a letter, not a picture, just a scratch, curved like a half-smile. It had been burned long ago. It had held no food. It had broken before it was useful. But it was brought here, placed by the fire, and left. No one took it back. This was not a place of answers. This was a place of endings. Not endings with ceremony. Endings with breath. A glance. A silence. A release. The kind of ending that does not close a story, but lets it fall open. In early spring, the same ridge held different light. Sharper. Colder. It came in sideways, catching in the dew and blinding the eyes. The same place, but not the same mood. The fires were smaller then, or sometimes absent. People came less often, or came quickly, then left. The ash here is thinner, more scattered. A place remembered, not used. The gatherings, when they happened, were briefer. Someone may have stood alone, watching the wind move over the thawing field below, hearing the call of the fox in the distant ravine, marking the moment not with voice, but with stillness, and leaving nothing behind. Now the ridge is mostly empty. The light still comes. The fire does not, but the place remembers. In late autumn, when the sun lowers early and the mist rolls slow across the valley, you can stand there and feel the hush. Not silence. Hush. the quiet made when people step back from the world just a little. The breeze carries the scent of dry moss and cold stone. A bird circles above, then turns uninterested, and for a moment you feel something pause, as if the ground is holding breath again, as if something waits. Not for you, just in general. You brush your hand along the grass. It bends easily. Somewhere beneath it, charcoal sleeps, ash the color of bone, a stick burned halfway through, a fragment of something not quite a pot, not quite a tool. Traces, laid without explanation. You close your eyes. You do not ask questions. You listen. The sun dips lower. The light fades from gold to gray. A branch sways. A leaf tumbles, forgotten before it lands. And the world folds its hands for the night. Damp wool and birch smoke. A drowsy day inside a Neolithic longhouse. In a longhouse, near the wall that never sees sun, there is a place where the straw is thinner. No one speaks of it. No one needs to. It is just a patch, smaller than a sleeping mat, quieter than a shadow, where the straw doesn't seem to stay. It slides away. It flattens faster. It always smells faintly of something old, though no one can say what. Sometimes a child will lie there, then shift to another spot without knowing why. Sometimes the dog sleeps there and dreams too much, twitching and murmuring with a voice no one understands. And sometimes, when the fire is low and the hour is heavy, someone looks toward it and says nothing at all. They used to place things there. Not recently, not for many winters now, but once, often, and with care. A shard of antler, a twist of dyed thread, a tiny bowl with one crack across its lip, filled with dried seeds, or the dust of herbs, or water left to still. Never for long. By morning, the item would be gone. Not missing, just removed, folded back into the cloth bag hanging by the door, pushed beneath the cooking bench, returned to the box where beads were kept. No one saw who moved it, but someone always did. That was the rhythm. At night, an offering. By morning, a memory. It was not worship, or if it was, no one called it that. It was simply a gesture, a pattern, a softness folded into the edges of the day. And over time, like all soft things, it thinned. There was no decision to stop, just other matters. New babies, colder winters, a shortage of flax. The old woman who always remembered was no longer able to rise before the fire. Her daughter had a heavier hand, a different way of stirring the pot. The boy who once arranged the offering with care now carried water instead, and later took a mate from another ridge who thought the custom strange and said so only once. It slipped away without anyone noticing. The way smoke slips through the eaves. The way ash settles after the pot is stirred. Quietly, completely, but the spot remains. The patch of floor where straw lies differently. The corner where the air is a little more patient. Where dust gathers in small, deliberate patterns. You might miss it. You might sweep it, thinking it no different from the rest. But if you place your palm flat on the floor there, especially in the hour before dawn, you may feel it, the echo of warmth, the faint pulse of something once repeated. And if you close your eyes, you might even remember the texture of dried nettle stems, the faint scent of crushed mint, the softness of bone polished by fingers. You might, or you might simply sit there for a long moment and feel at peace without knowing why. In another longhouse, far away, the same ritual once took a different form. There, they pressed handprints into damp clay and left them to dry behind the hearth. One print per season, always on the first frost. The clay wall held them for a decade, maybe two. Then someone rebuilt the hearth and smeared the surface flat. The prints are gone now, but the warmth still gathers on that part of the wall first. Not all rituals survive. Some were never meant to. Some are like footprints in shallow mud, sharp for a moment, then smoothed by rain. Their purpose was to be made, not to be kept. Others cling longer. A pattern in a spindle, a gesture in kneading bread, a pause before stepping over a threshold. Tiny things, unnamed, worn smooth by use. These stay. but even they drift. One day, the pattern is changed slightly, one thread pulled differently, one spice swapped for another, and no one notices. The new version settles in like dust, and the old becomes a story no one quite remembers how to begin. The longhouse holds more of these than anyone knows. A space once used for drying fish, now piled with firewood. A hook that no longer holds anything, but is never removed. A notch in the doorway where children once measured each other's height, now half covered by a basket. They are not history. They are simply what remains when intention fades and habit endures. The wind shifts. A faint rattle along the roofline. Smoke curls and brushes your cheek as you lie near the hearth, watching the low glow of coals. You think of the straw patch by the wall. You haven't touched it in years. But tonight, something nudges you. Not loudly, just a nudge, like a memory that hasn't yet formed. You rise, slowly. Your knees ache. The fire murmurs. You walk to the edge of the patch. Kneel. Rest your palm against the earth. Cool. Still. You stay there for a while, watching the shapes your breath makes in the air. Then, without knowing why, you untie the cord at your wrist and set it gently on the ground. A loop of leather, worn smooth, not valuable, but it fits. You don't wait for anything to happen. You simply return to your mat, cover your legs, and close your eyes. And in the darkness, as sleep begins to gather in soft folds around your thoughts, you feel something old and familiar settle beside you. Not a presence, not a voice, just the sense that you've remembered something, and that something has remembered you. Outside, the night deepens. The grass leans. The stars, untroubled, remain, and the house sleeps. In its bones, a breath is held. Beneath the straw, something lingers, not asking to be found, only staying, quietly. Damp wool and birch smoke. A drowsy day inside a Neolithic longhouse. The fire is already lit when he wakes. He didn't light it himself. That part is understood. The hearth does not begin cold in this half of the longhouse. Not for him. The ash is cleared before sunrise. The dry birch stacked close enough to steam, but not crack. The flame is low, contained, quiet. Not for cooking, only for warmth. A modest blaze, but steady. Intentional. He lies still beneath a pelt lined with goat fleece. It smells of chamomile and dusted ash. A cushion rests beneath his knees, wool stuffed, dyed a deeper brown than most, sewn by someone who knew her thread. He shifts slightly, and it sighs beneath him, not creaking, not crinkling, just soft. He does not speak. Not yet. Not until the warmth of the fire has reached his shoulders. Around him, the longhouse breathes. But not all of it. Just this side. The other side, the draftier end, closer to the doorway, where cold smoke gathers and dogs stir and children begin their noisier waking, is distant. Not sealed, not forbidden, but separate. He does not call it power. It is just position. He inherited this mat when his mother's breath grew shallow and her voice turned to rust. He did not contest the spot. No one did. He had always slept closest to the hearth anyway. It was simply confirmed. The others stir. A young woman, cousin or niece, it matters less than her usefulness, offers a bowl of warm grain. The wood of the bowl is smooth, its edge darkened by time and touch. It is not his usual one, but it will do. He eats slowly. The taste is subtle. Barley, milk, a trace of salt, and something else. Crushed seed, maybe your bitter herb. It is meant to warm the blood. She does not say so. She only watches his hand, and when it stills, she takes the bowl without asking. This is how things are. Not formal, not announced, just quietly arranged. There is a comb on the shelf near his mat. Not bone, not antler. Wood, finely carved. Oiled. The teeth are close, the handle stained with berry dye. It is not used often, but it is kept clean. Beside it, a string of beads. Polished. Mismatched. The red ones came from the coast. far beyond the lands his people walk. The blue from a cousin's trade 3 winters ago. They are worn sometimes, when others visit, or when he must speak before the house. Today, he does not wear them. There is no need. He moves slowly, not from pain, from pace. His time is not spent in the field, not anymore. He knows the rhythm of planting and harvest, of hoisting the sack and folding the seed. But he does not do it. He inspects the grain, not the soil. He speaks of fence repairs, but does not lift the posts. He sharpens a blade now and then, to remind his fingers of the task. But mostly he touches the handle and lets it rest again on its stone. Today, a visitor is expected, not one of great distance. A man from the southern ridge brings salt, usually, and smoked fish. He is loud and cheerful, and always arrives with too many things in his hands. The children like him. The goats do not. The mat is prepared. A space clear near the hearth, but not too near. A cushion set. A skin rolled. The smell of wormwood burns faintly in a clay dish. Its smoke sharp and cleansing. He watches all this without speaking. Watches the girl wipe the bowl's rim again, though it is already clean. Watches the boy bring an extra kindling and stack it with too much care. Watches his own hand smooth the corner of his mat, though no one will sit there but him. It is not vanity. It is form. When a visitor arrives, they greet with nods. There is no embrace. There is no need. The fire is fed slightly. The bowl is filled. The visitor talks, as he always does, of pigs gone lean, of water turned sour, of a woman on the edge of the ridge who speaks too freely. He laughs. He offers dried fruit wrapped in leaf. It is tart, and the skin sticks to the tongue, but the flavor is strong, lasting. The man listens. He nods. Occasionally, he speaks, short sentences shaped like stones. He chooses his words slowly, and when he does, the visitor leans closer. This is how respect is measured, not in the talking, but in the waiting. Afterward, the space is quiet again. The smoke curls upward. The bowl is wiped clean. The fire returns to its rhythm. He leans back slightly, feeling the pelt gather behind his shoulders. He closes his eyes, not to sleep, but to rest. And for a moment, there is nothing. No trade, no tools, no story to remember, no pot to mend, just the warmest place in the house, and the quiet of having nothing demanded. There are strange things about this life. He knows it. The way the others wait before speaking. The way his clothes are brushed when he stands. The way he hasn't walked beyond the clearing in 2 seasons, and yet knows exactly what lies there. The world comes to him now, with bowls, with questions, with respect woven into silence. Sometimes he misses the walking, the ache of the back after hauling stones, the cool shock of river water on calves, the hunger that made the simplest porridge taste full. But those things are no longer his. Not because he gave them up, because they gave him up. A child approaches in the late light. She carries a bowl too large for her hands. It wobbles, nearly spills. He watches her and does not reach to help. She places it on the mat before him and waits. He nods. She runs back, her bare feet pattering across the hard-packed floor. He picks up the bowl, turns it in his hand. It is carved with spirals, not his doing, but familiar, the edge still warm from the sun. He drinks slowly. The contents are thin, water with herbs, a trace of honey, a petal or two, meant more for ceremony than thirst. He finishes it anyway. As the sun lowers, the others eat, closer to the door, in groups, in motion. Someone laughs. Someone scolds. The smell of stew thickens the air. He eats separately, later, with fewer words, but the bowl is always full, and the bread is always warm. And when he is done, someone always takes it from his hand. The fire darkens. The coals settle. The longhouse turns inward. And still, he remains seated. Still, upright, not out of duty, out of custom. The warmest place holds its shape. He is not lonely. He is not exalted. He is simply placed near the fire, where the walls meet the rafters in a hush, where silence is a kind of company, where time does not pass, but gathers. And somewhere near the door, a child falls asleep beneath a draft. And somewhere near the wall, a cousin hums while folding wool. And somewhere in the straw, the old Mark still rests. Damp wool and birch smoke. A drowsy day inside Neolithic longhouse. The fire is never carried to him. It waits for him, always burning, always centered. Others tend it. Others fetch the kindling. Others sweep the ash. But he does not see the fire arrive, only that it is there when he wakes, when he eats, when he speaks. The flame has always seemed to know its place. In the low light of morning, a girl kneels by the hearth. She leans forward, breathes gently into the coals. Her fingers are pink with cold. She lays the thin birch splinters with a kind of careful urgency, a ritual without a name. He does not look at her directly. That, too, is custom. He watches the smoke rise instead. Thin, blue, curl-like thought. She finishes, stands, moves away. He nods, not to her, but to the fire, and begins his day. His tunic is brushed. It has been laid near the fire since before the sun rose. The wool is coarse, but warm, dyed in earth tones and faintly scented with dried thyme. Placed in the folds months ago to keep insects away. Now it carries only a ghost of the smell, just enough to remind him of something herbal, something dry and faintly bitter. He lifts the tunic slowly, as if testing its weight. He folds it once, then again, and finally draws it over his shoulders. The movement is his alone. The folding is not. Someone else did that, as they always do. The cushion he sits on is slightly misshapen. Not much, just enough that one side dips lower than the other. It will be replaced soon. He will not mention it. The one who notices it will do so tonight, after the house quiets. The new cushion will be firmer, a bit more tightly stuffed, smelling faintly of the storehouse. It may be too full at first. He will shift slightly when he sits. The next night, it will be right. These corrections happen silently, like the shaping of clay before the fire. There is a shell on the shelf above his bed. Small, pale, smooth by time and touch. It arrived in a leather pouch 6 winters ago, traded for 2 jars of honey and a fish hook that had never been used. He has never worn it. It does not match the beads he prefers. It is too bright, too smooth, too coastal. But he keeps it. It has become part of the room now. Like the cushion, like the smell of birch bark in the morning. Not valuable, but included. Today, he is meant to inspect the drying racks. Someone reminds him gently, just a phrase said while passing behind him with a basket. The nettle bundles have begun to curl. He rises slowly, as though the suggestion was his own. At the racks, he does not touch the nettle. He bends to look, nods once. The boy beside him waits for a second nod. Then he lifts the first bundle and turns it toward the sun. The man squints slightly, breathes in the faint scent of the drying herb. Not sweet, not pleasant, but proper. He nods again. The nettle will be brought in by evening. He will not see it moved, only that it is no longer outside. At midday, he walks the edge of the clearing. He takes a staff with him, light wood, worn smooth, not needed but expected. It clicks gently as he walks, tapping the ground in rhythm with his breath. A woman follows behind him. She is older than the others, but quicker with her hands. She carries nothing, says nothing. She is not a servant. There is no word for servant here, but she is always near. He walks the loop slowly, pauses near the goats, nods at a woven fence repaired with extra care, runs his fingers across a polished beam at the storehouse door. He does not open it. He only nods. The woman glances at the latch. Tomorrow, it will be retied with fresh leather. He will not mention it. Sometimes, he wonders what others think of his stillness, that he does not kneel to the fire, that he does not stir the pot, that his hands remain clean after the hunt. They do not seem to mind. They glance at him the way one glances at a carved figure. Not because it will move, but because it is there, and it holds meaning, even if no one quite agrees on what that meaning is. Once, he tried to help carry water. He was younger then. His mother still coughed at night. The others were away. The buckets were full. He lifted one. It was not heavy, but the silence afterward was. No one scolded him. But the next day, the bucket was smaller. The fire burned earlier, and his place at the hearth was warmed again, as if nothing had happened, as if the fire had never needed to be carried at all. He does not speak of power. There is no word for that, either. But there is space, and time, and the way others pause before asking. His evenings are long, not idle, just long. He listens to the talk, the laughter near the doorway, the rhythm of stories told for the 7th time. He smiles sometimes, and when someone looks his way, he nods. Not because he has something to add, because he is listening, because that, too, is part of it. Tonight, a guest will sleep near the fire, a cousin from the next hill, younger, sharper, eager. The guest will be offered the second best mat, the second warmest seat. The best remains where it is, even if it is not always the most comfortable. There is a wooden bowl on a shelf beside his bed, smooth at the lip, slightly chipped on one edge. It belonged to his father. It is not used anymore, but it is never moved. Sometimes, in the quiet before sleep, he reaches for it, holds it in both hands, feels the groove where a finger once pressed too hard, where the wood softened from years of heat and grain. He does not look into it. He just holds it, then places it back, always in the same spot. The fire dims. The house turns inward. One by one, the others lie down, near the goats, near the door, near each other. He stays seated for a while. The cushion is firmer tonight. Someone noticed. The smoke drifts upward, slow and blue. The bowl sits still on the shelf. The shell does not shine. The staff rests by the wall, quietly leaning. And the fire, as always, remains. He does not ask who fed it last. He does not know who will feed it next. He only knows it burns, and that, somehow, it has always been for him. Damp wool and birch smoke. A drowsy day inside a Neolithic longhouse. She wakes before the others, not because anyone asked her to, and certainly not because anyone watches, but because someone must rise early if the fire is to greet him already lit. The coals are low. She presses her fingers near the ash to check for warmth. It's still breathing, barely. She does not speak. Her hands know the motions. A twist of bark, a curl of moss, a few brittle twigs saved from the dryer beam above the smoke hole. The hearth catches quickly this morning. The air is still and the wood dry. A small blessing. She breathes again, this time more deeply, and only then begins her day. The longhouse is quiet. The others sleep in their nests of wool and straw. The children murmur and shift. The dog huffs once and curls tighter. Even the birds outside have not started their gossip. She moves softly, not out of fear, but practice. There are steps that creak and ones that don't. She knows which is which. The brush is beside the mat. Not her mat, his. She kneels and dusts the wool. A few crumbs, a pressed stalk of barley, a faint crust of salt. She lifts the tunic that was folded yesterday and brushes it again. He may never notice, but she always does. She straightens the cushion, the one with the stuffing just slightly wrong. It had to be replaced last week. He had shifted twice in the same sitting. That was enough. She made this new one herself. Firmer, quieter, laced with time to keep insects out. He hasn't remarked on it, which is the closest thing to praise he's ever given. It is, she thinks, a fine cushion. She remembers sleeping on straw by the door. Years ago, before she earned this place, this task, this duty, this silent orbit around someone else's warmth. It had been louder, nearer to the world. Goats bleating, wind creeping through the slats, children stepping over you on the way to relieve themselves, but also laughter, shared bowls, the hiss of soup before it boiled. This side of the longhouse is quieter, cleaner, But it is not warm because of the fire alone. It is warm because she keeps it so. The boy brings kindling too late again. She notices, but says nothing. He is learning. She was not always so prompt either. Once, she forgot to bring the bark in early spring. The wood had been damp. The fire had coughed and spat. He, the one who sits nearest the hearth, had simply looked toward it once. She remembered that look for days. Later, as the others stir, she turns to the jars. He prefers his water warm, not boiled warm, not cold from the clay jar in the shade, just touched by heat, held near the hearth for a while, until the edge is off. She prepares the vessel, wraps it in cloth so it doesn't cool before he lifts it, places it beside the cushion, to the right. He always reaches right first, though she doubts he realizes. She steps back, blends into the room. He sits. The water is lifted. He sips once, and sets it down. He will not thank her. This is not that kind of relationship. There are no thanks spoken here, only absence noticed. If the bowl were cold, he would know. If the cushion too soft, he would shift. If the fire dimmed, he would pause. His silence is her mirror. If she's done well, it stays clear. She watches him eat, slowly, always slowly, as if the food tastes better the longer it takes, as if attention is seasoning. She remembers eating with her hands in the doorway, hunched beside her sister, licking barley from her knuckles while the wind pressed through the seams of the wall. No bowls then, just fingers. Now she pours his stew with a carved ladle, wipes the lip of the bowl clean with a sprig of mint. He doesn't always finish it. Some mornings he forgets he's hungry. She empties the bowl later, when he's looking away. He will never know she tastes the last bit before scraping it out. Not because she's hungry, just to know what was offered. He has a shell. It sits on the shelf. She dusts around it, never over it. He has never touched it. She has never asked where it came from. But she has imagined. A trader's hand. A pouch drawn tight with sinew. A quiet bargain. One fish hook, one shell, no eye contact. She can see the trade more clearly than the object. The shell is too smooth, too round, too pale to feel real. But it catches light. That is enough. There are others like her. Not servants, exactly. There is no word for such a thing here. But watchers, carriers, tenders. The woman who knots his satchel strings each time he leaves, even though he never notices the weave. The boy who replaces his walking stick when the bark begins to splinter, even though the old one is barely used. The cousin who speaks for him in gatherings, not because he cannot, but because her voice carries better. Each of them makes space. Each of them carries fire. Once, she asked if she could sit by the hearth for a moment, while the others were out gathering, just to feel it directly, just to lean back and let her legs stretch before the work returned. He had not said no. He had simply turned his head and looked at the mat, and she had stepped back. The mat was still warm. She knelt by the pot instead. In the evenings, she braids the fringe on his outer cloak. It is not required. No one sees it but her. But he wears it when visitors arrive, and the fringe is part of the image. She chooses 3 colors, soft brown, bark red, pale gray, woven in the same pattern each time. She never changes it, except once. Once she tied a strand backwards, not to make a statement, just a moment of tired fingers. He had worn it, spoken to a trader, accepted a pouch of smoked apple slices. That night, she unbraided it and rebraided the strand correctly. She felt better, even if he never knew. She has her own fire, of course, far from the hearth, behind the partition of grain sacks and cordage. A clay pot, low and blackened. Her own kindling, her own meals, her own thread to mend. But she eats late, and the fire is small. The smoke stings her eyes some nights. But she tells no one. It is not a complaint, only a truth. She wonders sometimes if he dreams, if his sleep is different in the warmest place, if his thoughts are shaped by stillness instead of wind, if he notices how few sounds reach this part of the house, if that is what he prefers, or if, Maybe he misses the goats. She does. They make terrible companions, but excellent alarm clocks. He once dropped a bead from the string he wears when important guests come. It rolled beneath the edge of the mat. He didn't look for it. She did. She found it that night, tucked beside a splinter and a husk of lentil. She could have kept it. No one would know. But she placed it back on the shelf, quietly beside the shell. It did not shine, but belonged. Tomorrow she will rise again, before the others, before the birds, before the thought of morning fully arrives. She will kneel. She will coax the flame. She will sweep the mat, and arrange the bowl, and brush the cushion, and prepare the warmth. Not because he asks, but because he never needs to. And that is her task, the one who carries fire, so that someone else may never touch it. Damp wool and birch smoke. A drowsy day inside a Neolithic longhouse. It began with a sound, not a cry or shout, just a dull thump, not loud enough to startle, but strange enough that those closest to the hearth paused. The sound of a cushion shifting, then a low exhale, and a gentle thud of a bowl tipping, its contents quietly seeping into the straw. He had tried to rise too quickly. No one had asked him to. The mat beneath him, carefully arranged, aligned each morning with the seam of the hearthstone, had bunched just slightly to one side. Not by error, not by neglect, just use. Time. He had leaned to reach the water bowl. Something caught, and he had slipped. Not far, just enough to fall back onto his elbow. Startled, the bowl tipped. A thin trail of warmed water soaked into the mat. He did not speak. That silence was louder than the sound. The fire still burned. Of course it did. The flame hadn't noticed, nor had the pot of nettle broth, nor the spindle basket by the wall, nor the shell above the shelf. But the others had, not with words, just in the way they looked and then looked away, in the way the boy stepped forward a half step, then waited, in the way the girl's hand paused above the ladle. He rose slowly, with dignity, as though he'd meant to sit that way all along. He wiped his hands on his tunic, the same one brushed that morning. He did not ask for help. He simply stood. The cushion was replaced that night. The mat straightened. The water bowl re-oiled and warmed with fresh sage. No one mentioned it. But when he sat again, his hands lingered slightly above the mat, measuring the distance, testing the steadiness. He lowered himself slower. The fire caught the shine in his eyes, and for the first time in years, he blinked more than once before speaking. The woman who carried the fire noticed it first. Not the fall, the after. He left the bowl unfinished. Not from distaste. He had eaten worse, said less. But tonight he stopped halfway through, then stared at it for a long while, as though the contents had forgotten how to behave. She didn't speak. She simply took the bowl when he released it and poured the rest onto the coals. It sizzled. The smell rose. Roasted barley and herb. A scent usually pleasant. Tonight, it lingered oddly. Not unwelcome, but unsettled. That week, he did not wear his bead string. Visitors came. A young woman from the river's edge brought berries and news. A man from the forest edge carried flint cores and a crude drawing of a new trap. He listened. He nodded, but the beads remained on the shelf. And when he stood to leave the hearth and inspect the storehouse, he did not take the walking stick. He simply stepped slowly, resting one hand lightly on the wall as he passed. The boy followed, glancing at his feet. The next morning, the fire was slower to catch. The birch was damp, not soaked, but stubborn. The smoke curled lower. The coals coughed twice. She knelt longer, blew more gently, coaxed with dry moss, a curl of last year's sheep's wool. It caught, but unevenly. The hearth breathed back in little huffs. It took effort. He did not seem to notice, but he looked at her longer than usual when she rose. Just a glance. No change in tone, but something in the space between acknowledgement and habit. The mat, once slightly shifted, became the new straight. It was never realigned again, and each morning, when she dusted it, she began from the side he had leaned toward, pressing the cushion there just a little firmer to help him find it without effort. She never asked if he noticed, but once he adjusted himself mid-sentence, a subtle shift to the left, toward that side, and that was enough. The dog, too, had started sleeping closer to the hearth. Not beside him, not boldly, just within his orbit. It had once curled near the door, where bones were tossed and children dropped crusts. Now it inched closer, breath by breath, night by night. No one chased it away. Even when it thumped its tail in sleep, startling a cup into wobbling, it was allowed to stay. Because it, too, seemed to be watching. At night, he began sleeping earlier. Not dramatically, just quietly. He no longer waited for every child to lie down. No longer listened to every end of every tale. He let the cousins speak longer. Let the younger ones deliver the news of the forest or the stream. Once, he had added small commentary. Short, curved phrases that reminded everyone he was still watching. Now he watched without speaking, and once or twice, someone else began the answer before he did. The fire was tended as always. But once, just once, it went out in the early morning. She had risen late. The rain had started in the night. The bark was damp. When he woke, the hearth was only ash. She felt it before he spoke. That particular hush, the kind that folds tightly into the seams of the house and makes everything feel slightly smaller. He did not scold. He did not look. He just pressed his palms together and waited. She struck flint faster than usual. The fire caught. The heat returned, but it had been cold for one breath longer than it should. After that, she slept closer, just behind the basket stack, just near enough to feel the coals against her toes. No one questioned it, not even the girl who now slept where she used to, near the back wall. The girl never complained, but she began stirring the nettle stew less carefully, and once she sang to herself while sweeping. That had not happened before. One evening, he stood up to speak. No one had asked him to, but something in the fire's flicker must have touched a memory. He rose, slowly, placing both hands on his knees first. The house fell still. He cleared his throat, spoke of fences, of the path by the south stream and the stone that now blocked the bend. His voice was calm, measured, but caught once, just slightly, at the word stone. He continued. He sat again. The silence after was not the same as before. It was softer, as if something had exhaled and not quite returned. Later that night, she brushed the mat with extra care. The cushion was still warm from his body. She pressed it gently, as if remembering the shape, as if storing it. The bowl was washed. The fire fed. The dog curled against the bench. And the long house shifted, imperceptibly, but completely. There would still be visitors. He would still sit at the hearth. The bowl would still be warmed. But something had bent. Not broken, just bent. Like a beam in spring. Like a mat too often stepped on. Like a silence that no longer rested exactly where it used to. In the morning, the fire would still burn, and someone would still carry it. But now, the one who sat nearest it reached for warmth with his palms open. And in that gesture, small, simple, unnoticed, something else reached back. And so we've come to the end of our story tonight. The fire has dimmed. The voices have faded. And the world of the past settles once more into silence. It's a quiet thing. How lives lived so long ago can still brush softly against our own. In the way we carry water. In the way we gather at night. In the way we wait for warmth without knowing we are waiting. Their days were different. Their tools and rhythms, shaped by earth and sky. And yet, something familiar lingers. In the hush between words. In the kindness of small routines. In the comfort of watching light change slowly on a wall. If this story brought you peace, if it helped you feel a little more grounded, a little less hurried, I'd be honored if you'd like, or share, or subscribe. Only if it feels natural to do so. There's no rush here, no pressure, just a place to return to when the world feels too fast. Thank you for spending this time with me. You are always welcome here. Rest well, dream gently, and come back tomorrow for another story. We'll be waiting, quietly, by the fire.